a Netflix original film.
The Wi-Fi isn't working.
In the event of a global communications breakdown, do the following. Stay inside.
What just happened here is happening everywhere.
Avoid strangers.
We've all been deserted.
I don't trust them.
And most importantly, do not panic. Julia Roberts.
What happens next?
Mahershala Ali.
I knew something was coming.
Leave the World Behind. Rated R. Now playing only on Netflix.
Today on CityCast DC, we are doing forensics on the shocking announcement that the Wizards and the Capitals are leaving DC for Virginia. And we're looking at what the local political fallout in DC is likely to be. Plus, it's the end for DC's least beloved old hotel. It's a move that also tells a story of DC's troubled downtown. Axios' Cuneyt Dil and CityCast's Julia Karen are here with me. Today is Friday, December 15th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, Julia.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Cuneyt.
Hey.
So you did some reporting about kind of how this deal came together. And it's really the news that came sort of as a shock is really reverberating around DC, that the Capitals and the Wizards are moving from Gallery Place, where they've been for 25 years, in an arena that kind of revitalized the neighborhood. They're moving to Virginia. We talked yesterday about kind of what the draw was, how this is likely to change downtown and Northern Virginia. And now, of course, we're getting into recrimination season. And it wouldn't be DC without some self-loathing of what we did wrong. Your reporting also suggests that there were just some things going right for Virginia in terms of they had a lot of land to offer Leonsis that no city anywhere could offer.
Yeah, this whole earthquake seemed to be very sudden, but turns out Governor Youngkin, as you said yesterday, this was an idea that he and Leonsis, two pals in the Northern Virginia business world, chewed over about several years ago, this idea for an entertainment and sports mecca. And now they have announced it, but it took about a year of sort of these secret negotiations with Virginia to relocate the teams across the Potomac. And the deal making behind the scenes really accelerated, I'm told, over the summer. And they kept it pretty secret. There were some leaks. The Post wrote a little bit about it. But what was not really known was the extent to which Leonsis was serious about going to Virginia. The mayor sort of believed privately that, Ted's not going to go to Virginia. That's not actually going to happen. They're just trying to bargain here. But this was, from what I can tell, what I reported, a 1-year-long effort that slowly began. It really picked up in the spring and summer. And the offer was something DC couldn't match. I mean, this is 70 acres. DC could throw hundreds of millions an hour, however much amount of money they could give, but they could not, offer this at that site. And DC people are kind of puzzled. Some of the people inside the deal making in DC were thinking Leonsis just wanted the money and that they were going to give him the money. And turns out, he had this big mini city deal being offered by Virginia. So there's finger pointing in DC. The mayor says they did everything they could. City Paper had a great quote from Jack Evans, who said, quote, "The city administration is at fault here. They were aware of all of this," he says. Again, there were rumors that Virginia was being considered, and this is now some of the finger pointing that they should have taken those rumors more seriously.
So Jack Evans is a former DC council member, and he's kind of the most enthusiastic DC political figure about like the big deal, whatever the big deal is, to build a big thing. So this is like a particularly gut punch to his way of looking at the world.
Yeah, Jack Evans, if you ever sit down with him, he'll tell you all about how you built the convention center and all that. This is a big wig, and he's sort of never really spoken out against the mayor here. And this is where the finger pointing is really coming out of people like Jack and people like in the business community who are scratching their heads kind of. But if you ask me, they're all at fault. They're all at fault for not making more noise when it mattered. And now it's easy to Monday morning quarterback this.
Yeah, I was going to say, I watched some of Mayor Browser's press conference on Wednesday, which you were at, Cuneyt, and she looked like kind of stunned a little bit. You were there. Can you take us through what happened at this presser and what she had to say?
The mayor looked like she was walking into a funeral. That press conference was pretty terrible. You had the former mayor, Tony Williams, there too, who didn't speak much. And she tried to sound like the deal was still alive, that Leonsis could turn around minutes after hugging Youngkin essentially at Potomac Yard and come back to DC. But this was fantasy land. I mean, the mayor was trying to do damage control essentially. And what's going to happen is there's a gaping hole now, possibly in Chinatown. Okay, Monumental want to have concerts there. They want to have the Mystics and other events, which is all fine and great. But everyone knows it will be a huge gaping loss in Chinatown.
And this is an arena that, was credited with revitalizing it.
Yeah.
I mean, Marion Barry was still mayor when it opened. It was the very end of his term in a area that had been just kind of nothing going on at night and not a lot of reason, unless you had an office down there, to be there. Julia, you still call it the MCI Center, which was its name, yes?
The original, the founding name. Yeah. I mean, the reason I started playing hockey was my dad took me to a game at the then MCI Center, and I pointed at the ice and I was like, I want to do that. And like, I signed up for hockey because I saw the Caps at what used to be called the phone booth, and then was Verizon Center, now Capital One Arena. But yeah, I mean, it is kind of wild to see that place as an institution look like it's not necessarily just going to like evaporate, but be empty most nights. Like, I'm so used to having people crowding down there and going to something, anything.
I remember getting a invite round about the time it opened to the opening of a restaurant down there. And I thought, is this a misprint? Like, why would anybody, like open a fancy restaurant in that neighborhood? So it is, for old people, quite shocking, because there was a sense that like this part of town had been fixed. It was a key part of this city's comeback. And now it's all of a sudden a big question mark again, right at the same time as downtown DC in general is struggling. Most government workers are often not at work. This is, all the other businesses in that building with the arena been closed. So this is a really precarious moment for, this, I think, particularly resonant with people who remember kind of the quote unquote bad old days.
The brand new Arbor at Tacoma is built for your most convenient urban living. Whether you want to enjoy the vibrant Tacoma, DC community or comfortably retreat into a sleek sanctuary all your own. The kitchens have striking dark navy and white cabinets, and throughout the home, there are wood floors and smart home technology. Some homes even have a private outdoor space. With a quick walk to the metro, you can easily head into downtown or stay close and enjoy the retail that's on site. Located at 218 Cedar Street Northwest, the Arbor Tacoma offers brand new 1- and 2-bedroom condos starting in the upper 300,000s. Visit thearborattacoma.com for more information. That's Tacoma with a K, so TheArborattacoma.com.
So let's break down the politics here, because there's a lot of finger pointing in DC. And Cuneyt, you have already sort of said it's everyone's fault, but I would like to go through some of the cases against different folks who allegedly are responsible for this, starting with the mayor and the executive branch. I understand Ted Leonsis, the owner of the Washington Capitals and Wizards and Monumental, his company, that he has complained bitterly the last few years about sort of crime and just sort of general quality of life stuff around Chinatown, drug use, stuff that makes people from the suburbs not feel as happy coming downtown. I can attest that that's, I mean, I never felt unsafe there, but it's not necessarily nice to be hanging around.
Right.
And that their one thing they had to do was keep this place safe and tidy for visitors, and they failed. What do you think of that?
Yeah, Leonsis personally was unhappy with that neighborhood. And, when the mayor was sort of asked, what can you do about the crime? Can you put more police? She would say things like, we have to balance policing in neighborhoods where there's more actual crime. Now, of course, Chinatown crime has shot up in the past 2 years. And for Leonsis, all these issues compounded. He's sitting in his office in Capital One Arena. First, he was upset people were playing music outside, metro station buskers. Then he's upset about this drug dealing or marijuana dealing by the metro, apparently. Then he's upset the crime's going up. And by the way, Mayor Bowser, who they never really got along, she's not really, bringing the full force of MPD to bear, I guess is what he wanted. So when all this is happening and he's feeling less loved by the city government, he's finding a friend in Glenn Youngkin, and they were able to find something, I guess, that they couldn't do anywhere else, which is just build this mini city.
And it's like a semi-private mini city,
Yeah.
so they don't have to worry about pesky citizens exercising their rights to sing loudly and unpleasantly.
Or smoke weed.
Exactly. As we were reminded yesterday when protesters showed up, when security drew the whole gate and shut it and said, this is private property, actually, you don't have a right to be here.
Right. So then, getting back to the forensics for a minute and the finger pointing, people in the council have said, hey, this is the mayor who was elected with the tremendous support of the business and real estate worlds. And they spend a lot of energy on economic development. How could this have been going on and they didn't know? Isn't it their job to know?
Yeah, it's so cloak and dagger, the whole thing.
I think they're super ineffective is the answer.
So let me ask you the awkward question then. The big scandal of the first half of the year for the mayor was that her right-hand man, economic development chief and chief of staff, John Falchicchio, was forced out, resigned abruptly, allegations of sexual misconduct. He was supposed to be good at his job. If that hadn't happened, if he hadn't done the stuff he did or was accused of doing, do you think there would have been a different result here? I mean, this is all prognostication.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, having a right-hand man would have helped for sure. But DC should have, if they really were serious, put a deal on the table a year ago. That's what a lot of people are saying privately. Falchicchio, I guess, was out by March, but this issue with Capital One Arena and the crime issue really was known for more than a year. I mean, it is a scandal almost in and of itself that he hasn't really been replaced by someone who could have seen this coming and would have done something to stop it, basically.
I feel like it's all sort of kind of this failure of imagination.
Yeah.
That I thought, well, they'll never leave the city. All the teams are coming back to cities. That's where you want to be. And in fact, the trend in sports ownership is, as you wrote today, that they're making these as kind of like real estate plays more than sports plays, which is you control a whole slew of territory. I'm told that Ted Leonsis, who's obviously very wealthy, but maybe not as wealthy as some sports owners, resented or didn't like that the other owners in the kind of new mode of stadiums also control like a hotel or an entertainment space and have all these other revenue streams beyond the team, which is what he's going to get over there. So I think people in the city, including me, couldn't imagine that somebody would want this other thing, even though that's actually what's been happening in a bunch of other markets. And there's also this failure of imagination that like people thought, well, like DC's downtown's back, everything's good. We're not in the 80s and 90s anymore, and couldn't imagine that people might not see it that way in the face of rising crime and stuff.
Yeah, and I'm going to name some names. Councilmember Kenyon McDuffie is sort of supposed to be the business person lead on the council. Where was he on this? Why wasn't he holding hearings on this? Council Chairman Phil Mendelson, who has called himself a nitpicker proudly as someone who loves the process and the details. Where is his vision for the future of downtown in DC? Why wasn't he more upfront about this?
Also, where was he on the stage with Muriel Bowser at this press conference?
That's a great point. Someone asked that, and I think Tom Sherwood asked that, and his spokeswoman ran down in the Wilson building and told us afterward that he was at a pre-planned meeting by the Council of Governments. But whatever, as this earthquake's happening in DC. But where's the vision for the future of DC when you have these council members who are apparently just content to sit back as two sports franchises leave suddenly?
Oh, look, if there's a piece of terrible news and the mayor's going to take the mic, I want to stay far away from that, right? Not get any of the blame myself if I'm a usual butt-covering elected official.
Yeah, I think you got it there.
But listen, you cover the mayor pretty closely. You cover the administration pretty closely. One of the things that I worry about is that, she is now thinking legacy. This would be a pretty rotten piece of her legacy. Is this going to cause her to turn even harder towards what I think is actually, unlike having a basketball hockey arena, is actually a bad sports idea, which is building a football stadium? I can imagine that DC will think like, we've got to do this in order to keep our reputation up. And that's going to be a very expensive fight with a lot of opportunity costs. You could build a lot of other stuff besides the sports stadium. Do you feel like these two things are going to be linked, at least in people's minds?
Well, they definitely got to get the Commanders now, I guess. I mean, this is almost a bigger loss than football, though, for DC, because it's, 80 plus games a year versus way less for a football stadium. I mean, the conventional wisdom, again, is RFK is the best spot, but I don't believe that's a given. I think exactly like we talked about, having this mini city is the model for a lot of sports franchises. And it might even be more so for a football stadium, where you have the example of the Patriots Stadium and whatever. So I think the Commanders are looking at all options, and might be looking at Virginia too.
Yeah. So in terms of like the long-term impact on Bowser's legacy, does this stick with her in like a harmful way? Like, could she lose a re-election bid over this, you think?
Well, she's going to have to run again for a fourth term, and this was her first year in her third term. The problem for DC during Bowser's 3 terms now, I think, has been DC either had to get schools really right, so they were as good or as better than the suburbs, which they've improved, but not to that extent, or they have to have this sort of very friendly economy that keeps things humming, that keeps the culture and the magic of the city, and persuades people to move in, even if crime isn't great and even if the schools aren't perfect. She has to do one or the other, and I think she's going to go. She's already doubled down on Commanders, but I think she does have to give voters something if she wants to run for a fourth term, and schools aren't going to improve overnight. So juicing development and building out RFK, well, that could be a plan she wants to go even more gung-ho about now.
Well, I think for Josh Harris has to be delighted with this news, because if he is looking for help building a stadium, this I think is a new piece of leverage he has.
Oh yeah, that's 3x that 500 million. I'm sure he's thinking about all sorts of money.
Speaking of things leaving downtown, one that people probably won't miss, or might not even have any personal sentimental associations with, it's a couple blocks away from the arena, the Harrington Hotel, which is this kind of old pile. You see a lot of misinformed looking tourists outside because it's a lot cheaper than most downtown hotels. It's got a kind of greasy spoon diner type restaurant in it, and a bar that became very popular with the Proud Boys and other right wingers who I think couldn't afford to drink at the Trump Hotel during the Trump years. But there's I feel, at least in talking to folks, there's a kind of weirdly nostalgic reaction to its closing. Julia, you've been reading up on this.
Yeah. So this is a hotel that was built in 1914. As you mentioned, like the primo location, like near the White House, near the mall, was like the big draw of the thing. The rooms were kind of like, as you mentioned, inexpensive, but like pretty dingy. And man, I'm more upset about Ollie's Trolley, the burger and greasy spoon joint. R.I.P. man. I don't know. Like, to me, the Harrington, it had this like sign out the side of it, and it looked like a bat wing signal. And when my dad worked downtown, like we would go from the phone booth, right, to near the Hotel Harrington, and we'd be like, oh, like we know where we are because we can see like the bat wing for the Hotel Harrington.
Yeah, the thing is, it's like a good-looking building in the sense that the buildings built in 1914, the sort of low-rise skyscrapers, were tended to be good-looking in a way that a lot of stuff in downtown DC that came up in the post-World War II years is not. So, it's sort of nice to walk by. What's going to go there?
I don't know. Could Ted get his hotel empire downtown, hypothetically, and just buy the Hotel Harrington?
I was talking to a guy who works, sort of politics, real estate adjacent, and he was saying, like, if they really want to woo Ted for like a multi-revenue stream thing, they could give him the Harrington.
There you go. Bowser, get on it, girl. Let's go.
As a DC native, I never even ventured. I think I went to all these once, but I will say it's sort of that greasy spoon you don't see many of. And as a reporter, I've definitely gone there with some sources, and you could get cheap lunch and feel like you're in a proper downtown, maybe in Philly or New York or something.
It also is like kind of a last vestige of the sort of, I don't know, raffish downtown of, pre-1990s DC. And, that we all thought was like consigned to the past. Ollie's Trolley, there had been a place opposite Ford's Theater, another greasy spoon. There was just like, there were places like that around downtown Washington in a way that there aren't now. So, if people nostalgize this sort of greasier era of downtown, on the other hand, from what we're hearing about Gallery Place, maybe that era is coming back.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And we're suddenly not so nostalgic about it.
Yeah, let's see if rents go down.
All right, Julia, this has been a bit of a downer of an episode, but you were very excited this morning about a piece of happy news. What's the story?
Listen, I needed a serotonin hit. I think a lot of us did. And this week, we found out that Roofers Union, the really popular bar in Adams Morgan, Marjorie Meek Bradley's joint, it is making a surprise comeback. There was a ton of shock and sadness when it was announced that it was going to close earlier this year. I was one of the people who was mourning its loss, but now it's going to reopen in 2024. So that is a big plus. Also, we got news that Looking Glass Lounge in Petworth, the reaction to it on social was basically as if people had found out that Tupac was actually alive. So it's hilarious and fun and great, and we will link it all in our show notes for you. If Tupac was actually alive, maybe he could resurrect the phone booth and keep the Capitals and Wizards downtown.
Or at least you could watch one of the Virginia-based games from there. Not that a lot of people are eager to do that right now, because the Wizards' current record is 3-20. It's not great times for that team, no matter where they're playing.
That's true.
Julia, awesome to be with you.
Thanks, Mike.
And Cuneyt, come back soon. It's always good to hear from you. You are really one of the best sourced reporters in DC.
Hey, thanks. It's good to talk to you.
And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. Our executive producer is Priyanka Tilve. Our producer is Julia Karen. Our newsletter writer is Kayla Cote-Stemmerman. Our production assistant is Susanna Brown. And our hosts are Bridget Todd and me, Michael Schaefer from Politico. Music is by Alex Roldan. If you enjoyed the show, well, tell Mayor Bowser's office. We won't leave. We want to hear what solutions she's planning for downtown. We'll be back Monday morning with more news from around the city. Bye.